When more than a week had passed by and their lessons remained mostly theoretical...
Ooh, sorry, I forgot that was not chilled at all.
Oh, yeah, no, it's not. Literally room temperature.
It's not bad, it was just not what I expected. Happy Saturday!
Happy Saturday! You're probably not watching this on Saturday, but it's Saturday for us.
Yeah, we're recording on the weekend.
Heck yeah, we are, because we are creatives. And this is what we do.
Well, mostly because TJ works all week and,
becomes
energy?
a baby.
I was gonna say you're out of energy at the end of the day, which is very fair, but, baby also works. Do you need a refresher on what happened last week?
I definitely need a refresher for what happened last week.
What did happen last time?
We went to the farmer's market, right?
That's
what it was titled anyway.
Yeah, that's right. We went to the farmer's market, and Izzy ran into some kids from the local school.
Right. Senna?
Yeah. And, her little crew.
Mm-hmm. It was a bunch of bitches.
They are a bunch of bitches. I can't honestly remember what else happens in that chapter. I think that's the most notable thing. So, you want to just jump straight into it?
Yeah, I think we should. We got a normal-sized one again this time. No short ones. This one is titled The 7 Disciplines. When more than a week had passed by and their lessons remained mostly theoretical, Izzy began to feel extremely anxious about the whole ceremony bit. She still didn't fully understand what they were expecting from her, aside from plunging a dagger into her own heart. And it was hard to feel prepared when all they were teaching her had to do with witch culture, history, and potion making. Brewing potions was practical and all, but she wanted to learn some proper spells. Izzy brought this up to Sam one afternoon as they were walking into town for some coffee from the local cafe, Magic in a Cup. I just think I would feel better if I knew exactly what I'm going to have to do, Izzy grumbled as she pulled her coat tighter to brace against the cold wind. You already know what you have to do, came Sam's muffled voice through their thick, knitted scarf. You'll present 3 charms or spells to the elders as proof of your magical abilities in the evening, and once they've approved you, you'll be scheduled a time slot for your official ceremony. Yeah, and then all I have to do is stab myself in the chest, Izzy stated in a tone that she hoped properly conveyed how ridiculous this sounded. Or stomach, Sam shrugged. I don't get why you're getting so hung up on this. It's not like you're really gonna die. Probably. Izzy shot them an unappreciative glare. I just think that if I'm gonna have to do magic at this exam, then I should be learning actual magic. I don't get why we're wasting time on all this history and stuff. I mean, Halloween is this Sunday. Well, that stuff is important too, Sam argued. More important, really. What the ceremony is really about is to make sure that you truly understand what you're signing up for. It's not just magical powers, it's a new life, an entire world that you're becoming part of. If you don't know what that means, if you don't even understand what or who you are, then how can you pledge your life to the goddesses? Izzy fell silent as the two of them rounded a corner. Since arriving in midnight, Izzy hadn't really thought too much about this new life and how things would change for her. The powers were a perk for sure, and the extended life wasn't something to balk at, but what else was she signing up for? Izzy had never been religious, in spite of how hard Camilla had tried to get her children involved in her church, and Izzy had never really considered the role the 3 goddesses played when thinking about her newly discovered witchhood. Would she have to pray to them every day? Were they even real? When the 2 cousins arrived at Magic in a Cup, Izzy had been so preoccupied with her thoughts that she barely noticed the small, multicolored bulbs that decorated the storefront window. The cafe turned out to be a charming little place that had the unique quality of looking like a tiny bakery on the outside, in spite of the 2 full-size dining floors that occupied its interior. They sold the best coffee in town, along with a wide array of baked goods, sandwiches, and salads in the most odd combinations Izzy had ever heard. Do you want to try the raw beef salad with blood-flavored dressing? Sam asked Izzy with a completely serious face while they stood in line, waiting to put in their orders. Blood-flavored? She snorted. What does that even mean? I'm not sure I want to know. Sam grinned. It took almost 10 minutes for the two cousins to finally reach the counter, and when they did, they were met with a nervous and sweaty-looking teenage boy. Izzy racked her brain for the type of creature he was, but it never came. He was a thin and pimply kid with navy blue skin and dark hair, and his eyes were bloodshot and bulging. "Welcome to Magic in a Cup," he told them hastily, the look on his face painfully telling. Izzy and Sam exchanged a concerned look. "Are you okay?" Izzy asked tentatively, and the boy looked at her with pleading eyes. It's just my luck to get stuck pulling a double shift on National Pumpkin Latte Day, you know?" His eyes started to tear up as he looked at them, and Izzy was suddenly at a loss for words. "You'll get through it, bud," she told him at last. She gave the kid a few awkward pats on the arm in support, while Sam cringed visibly in the background. When the pair finally settled down at a table several minutes later, one that sat nearby the bauble-filled window which had grown to encompass the entire outer wall, Sam couldn't stop chuckling even when Izzy gave them a sharp jab in the side. "It wasn't that bad," she told them defensively. "It wasn't that bad?" Sam repeated in disbelief. "Greg just quit his job because of you." "Oh, please, Greg did not quit because of me," Izzy scoffed. "He quit because of his unreasonable work conditions." Sam shrugged and gave their pumpkin spice latte a skeptical sniff. "Greg is a demigod. He can take it." "Maybe he shouldn't have to take it," Izzy pointed out. "Even if he can take it, if it makes him miserable, then isn't it better to find something that he actually enjoys doing?" "Well, sure, but the kid still needs to make money, and someone still needs to make the coffees." "Are you telling me that there's only one barista in all of Midnight?" Izzy asked skeptically. "No, of course not," Sam replied in a tired voice. "But it's not like he has a ton of experience doing other things either." "Then this is a great time to get some of that experience. Plus, you just said that Craig is a demigod, so surely he has some talent." Izzy watched in amusement as Sam struggled to come up with an argument, and gave in with a sour chuckle and a shake of their head. "Fine. But it's on you if we can't get our daily dose of caffeine from a cup anymore." They grinned, pointing their fork threateningly at Izzy. She shrugged. "I'm okay with that." "See, this is why we don't interact with people outside of the immediate circle," Sam stated matter-of-factly, drawing a metaphorical circle in the air with their fork. "Other people just mess with your head and make you think that the exhausting world of capitalism is normal." A cold laugh sounded from somewhere behind Sam, and a few seconds later, Senna and her goons appeared at their table, sporting shiny, matching jackets and cruel smiles. "I couldn't agree with you more," Senna told Sam with what sounded like proper sincerity. "Not with the capitalist nonsense, of course. But you really should stick to your own kind. It would save the rest of us so much effort in having to actively avoid you." "Can we help you with something, or are you just here to reenact your favorite part of Mean Girls?" Sam snapped back aggressively. "Poorly, too, I might add." Izzy snorted and quickly hid her grin behind her hand to avoid the fury of Senna. To her surprise, however, Senna just looked amused. "Little fishy's got teeth," she told Sam pointedly, to the great entertainment of Soot and Horns. That wasn't actually his name, but Izzy had yet to catch the name of the third friend. Personally, Izzy thought this was a pretty basic and obvious attempt to provoke Sam, but then she glanced over at her cousin and saw that it was working much too well. Their face was quickly taking on a strange shade of green, and they looked about ready to pounce on Senna. So Izzy threw her hand forward and clamped it around their wrist to keep them seated. Sam, however, was much stronger than they looked and easily put their arm out of Izzy's grip and out of reach, and in a matter of seconds they had stood up and was approaching Senna with a menacing look in their eyes. To avoid a full-on fist fight and probably a ban from Magic in a Cup, Izzy got up too and swiftly stepped in front of her cousin and Senna, who just stood there smirking, clearly enjoying getting a rise out of Sam. "Hey, cool it," Izzy told them firmly under her breath. She didn't understand why Senna didn't look scared. Sam's eyes had always been unique and a sort of electric, but now they were literally glowing. Like tiny sparks were going off deep within them. Not just that, but Sam's lips had receded in a deep hiss, showing off an impressive set of razor-sharp, retractable teeth. In spite of this horrific new side of Sam, Izzy stood her ground and placed a hand on their shoulder, forcing them to focus on her instead of Senna. Once she grabbed their attention, Izzy made a clear indication toward the door and gave them a tight squeeze on the shoulder before turning around and facing Senna. She looked pleased where she stood, shadowed by her goons. "What's wrong, Bella?" Senna asked with a goading tone. "You look worried about your half-breed cousin couldn't match up to someone like me." "No, I'm sure they could kick your ass," Izzy replied, fighting hard to keep her own anger in check. "I just don't want to get us banned from here just because of some bitchy high schooler whose only relief in life seems to be making others feel miserable. And by the way, it's Izzy, not Bella." "Noted," Senna replied in a bored voice while Soot snickered stupidly in the background. "Make a note of this, too," Izzy continued, suddenly racking her brain for insults she used with her own bullies and which would be repurposed for a snotty witch. "Next time you want to come after my cousin in a public place, consider how that makes you look. Isn't your family, like, super influential here? Is this really what they want you to be doing? Picking on a kid who's literally done nothing but try to avoid you? That's really sad, and it says a lot about you." Izzy felt a strange sense of satisfaction as she watched Senna lose control of her temper, her nostrils flaring and her skin tone getting gradually redder, while Soot and the goat man glared angrily at her from the sidelines. "You should watch what you say around me, Raven," Senna hissed at her. "I'm not someone you want to pick a fight with, neither am I." As Senna stepped forward in an impressive act of intimidation, her eyes flashing furiously, Izzy spotted Sam slip out of the cafe from the corner of her eye and knew that it was time to head out before things escalated further. "You know," she sighed with an air of sadness, forcing herself to remain calm as she walked around the table gathering her and Sam's things. "When I first got here, even though my whole family had told me what you and your family were like, there was still a small part of me that thought, sure, this girl is a piece of work. But I'm not afraid of a little work. And maybe there's actually something about her that makes her worth the work. But you know what I've realized since then? It's a rhetorical question. Don't answer it. You're not just a piece of work. You're a piece of shit, too. There's just no part of me that is okay with wasting my time on a piece of shit." Senna's fury had burnt out in an instant at Izzy's surprising words, and had instead been replaced with shock and confusion. The stunningly beautiful bully who always stood tall and walked with purpose had instead stared incomprehensibly at Izzy as she was berated for her actions. Soot and Horns had evidently been stunned into silence as well, and the two of them stood glancing nervously between their leader and her new enemy as Izzy pulled over her winter gear and prepared to leave. Senna currently appeared to be too surprised for words, so, in lieu of a proper goodbye, Izzy gave her a satisfied smile and flipped her off before turning on spot and marching out of the cafe, joining her cousin in the cold October afternoon. She found them shaken and shivering around the corner, and Izzy immediately helped them get their coats and scarf on. "I'm sorry about that," Sam mumbled as they tucked their hands into the large pockets of their coats. "I didn't mean to get that worked up in public. I'm sorry." "Hey, it's alright," Izzy told them with a reassuring smile. "We all get upset sometimes, and it's not like Senna doesn't deserve a good ass-whooping. I bet you could have kicked her ass 100 times over. I just didn't think it was necessarily worth it over one stupid comment." Sam swallowed hard as they stared at the ground between them, then heaved a sigh and looked up into Izzy's eyes. "There's something I haven't told you about me. If this is your coming out speech, I think it's a bit late for that," Izzy said in an attempt to ease the tension, but Sam just shook their head. "I'm serious," they stated firmly. Izzy frowned at her cousin, taken aback by the distressed look on their face and the way their right leg wouldn't stop bouncing. "Hey, it's okay," she told Sam in a somber tone. "You can tell me anything." Sam looked at her with uncertain eyes, then took a deep breath. "I'm part mermaid." Izzy stared at them for a moment. "You're part mermaid?" she repeated, and Sam nodded. "How is that even possible?" Sam groaned dramatically, mostly out of annoyance, then left the corner and began to walk back toward the Raven mansion with hunched shoulders. Anticipating the reveal of Sam's mysterious mother at last, Izzy quickly matched pace and walked silently by their side, determined to let them speak without interruption for once. "My dad traveled a lot when he was younger," Sam explained once they'd left the streets of downtown Midnight and reached the road that led them homeward. "As an anthropologist, he got to visit a bunch of cool places and meet people from basically everywhere. And, well, it's not like he's a monk, right?" Their face grew hot and red at the uncomfortable topic. Anyway, Sam shook their head and went on. At some point, he found himself just outside of Japan where he encountered a squad of mermaids. He managed to get in their good graces by helping them take down this massive oil rig, but one of the mermaids grew really attached to him and wanted him to leave his home to join her in the ocean. Obviously, there are ways that a witch can obtain the ability to live underwater, but Omar said no anyway because he was still pretty young and he wanted to keep traveling. So, he left then? Yeah, Sam confirmed, their brow deeply furrowed. Then, 5 years down the road, Omar comes home one day to find a kid sitting on his front porch. You? Izzy guessed. Me. They nodded. See, mermaids don't exactly procreate like the rest of us. They don't even procreate like fish. It's more of an emotional bond that sometimes materializes in the form of a new creature. And that can happen even when it's, one-sided? Izzy asked, careful about her choice of words. Sam snorted and, with a well-placed kick, set a small rock bouncing down the street ahead of them. It certainly did this time, they grunted. Only mermaids aren't supposed to mate with other species. So when I popped out of my egg with legs and toes and all, it was pretty clear who the other parent was, and the other mermaids decided that they didn't want me around. To avoid any punishment, or backlash, my mother decided that it would be better for me to go live on land instead, with Omar. She helped me find a way through the Pacific and Southern Ocean until I could hop on the conveyor belt and ride that up north. She just left you there? Izzy cried, shooting her cousin a distressed look. Sam snorted. Nah. She made sure a freshwater nymph friend of hers tracked me down once I reached land, and they helped me get to midnight. Omar wasn't exactly pleased to see me at first, though. Really? Izzy was surprised to hear this. Her uncle seemed like the warmest and friendliest person on the planet, and she never had pictured him turning away a kid who was his own. But then again, she hadn't really known any of them for a long time. How well did she honestly know her family? Well, in his defense, he had no reason to think that I was telling him the truth, Sam argued sensibly. I mean, he had no idea that mermaids and witches could mate, let alone with only one party present. Wouldn't you be suspicious? I guess, Izzy admitted. So, is this why Senna had been giving you such a hard time? I wish, they replied with a rueful smirk. Unfortunately, being born a raven is enough for any and all of the Devons to believe that you deserve a life of misery and loneliness. That's idiotic. Tell me about it. They walked in silence for a few minutes, Izzy letting all of this new information settle in her mind, while Sam delighted in being able to speak to someone about their history without fear of judgment. Of course, Birdie and Tom knew all about this too, and Sam could have talked to them about it if they wanted to, but it was different telling someone who had no clue at all. Still, Sam knew that if anyone could relate to feeling unwanted and pushed away by their parent, it was their cousin. And since they had built up a good relationship with Omar over the past several years, it wasn't as painful to talk about as they'd expected it to be. Izzy suddenly broke the silence. Do you grow a tail when you're underwater? Sam gave her a disturbed look. No. So it's just the anger management problem and the sparkly eyes, then? Izzy recapped in a sincere voice, earning her a snort and subsequent raucous laughter from Sam. No, I definitely get the anger management issues from your side of the family. They corrected her as soon as speaking was once again an option. That's probably true, Izzy agreed solemnly, thinking back to the numerous fights she'd gotten into back in New York. Bullies at school, drunken brawls at various parties and clubs, almost tearing the limbs off her brother when one of his friends had acted particularly nasty. You got the eyes right, though, Sam added. And I am able to breathe underwater, and, not to brag, but I'm a pretty decent swimmer, too. Izzy genuinely thought that this newest revelation was the most exciting thing to happen all week, and she wasted no time or effort in telling Sam this, and by the time the pair returned to the mansion, the whole event with Senna and her friends had disappeared into history. When they emerged into Birdie's study in high spirits, the old witch greeted their news with a great deal of surprise, but no questions. And when Birdie then suggested that they continue their study on the proper techniques for potion making with Tom that afternoon, Sam had a different proposal in mind. Izzy didn't know if it was her nagging or the fact that she'd made it blatantly obvious that she had no longer any romantic interest in Senna, but Sam proposed that perhaps it was time to teach Izzy some proper magic spells. For just a moment, it looked like Birdie was going to argue with them, but then she saw the way her granddaughter's eyes lit up with excitement, and she knew that it was time. So, while Izzy watched breathlessly from her cushion on the floor, Birdie got up and walked over to an old cabinet where she kept all of her herbs, spices, and plants, along with her and Tom's private collection of spellbooks and potion recipes. When she returned to their little circle beneath the stars, she was carrying a stack of 7 books. As a witch, gaining full control of your magic will be one of the most difficult things you've ever done, Birdie said importantly as she set the stack of books down next to Izzy. It will take time, effort, and energy you didn't even know you had. However, if you work hard and heed our advice, I'm certain that you will learn to control your powers without too much difficulty. And if you can't, we can always get you a wand, Sam added, stifling a wide grin. Birdie shot her grandchild a reproachful look. I'm sure it won't come to that, she assured Izzy with a comforting voice. Izzy, who had thought Sam's comment was uncharacteristically helpful, frowned at her grandmother. What's wrong with using a wand? She asked, full of curiosity. It hadn't occurred to her until now, but none of her family members appeared to use wands. In fact, the only time she'd seen one since arriving in Midnight was in the hands of a small child. Witches don't typically need wands to perform spells, Birdie explained in a solemn tone. They're usually saved for unusual circumstances. Only incompetent witches use wands, Sam paraphrased at once. Like, if a little kid is really slow to access their powers, the wand helps them channel their energy until they can do it on their own. Izzy gave a surprised kind of nod. Oh, so it's like training wheels for a bike. Precisely, Birdie confirmed. Now, back to the topic at hand. For novices such as yourself, we typically begin with some basic spells and enchantments. So today, we will be working on a basic summoning spell. I want you to think of a small item, something that can fit in the palm of your hand. It's important that you choose an item with which you are familiar, and you need to know roughly where this item is in the exact moment. Can you do that? Izzy nodded, then closed her eyes. She thought of the decent-sized ring that Camilla had left for her when she died, but quickly realized that she hadn't seen it since unpacking her bags. Instead, Izzy chose the cheap blue lighter that she always kept with her ashtray under the bed. Ready? Birdie asked, and Izzy nodded. Good. What I want you to do now is take a moment and just breathe. Feel your limbs, your fingers and toes. You're breathing. Izzy felt a bit silly just sitting there with her eyes closed, and she pictured Sam grinning amusedly in the background, but she quickly shut that thought down and tried to focus. She focused on the way her legs felt slightly uncomfortable in her crisscross position, and how her fingers felt cold and stiff in the chilly tower room. All magical creatures consist of magical energy, Birdie explained softly while Izzy kept her eyes shut. It's difficult to get a grip on it at first, but I need you to reach inward and try to feel it. Feel the way it moves through you, following from your stomach and into your chest, and then onward into your arms and hands. As you feel it reach the tips of your fingers, focus on the items you've chosen. See it in your mind's eye and picture it resting in the palm of your hand. Izzy gave a quick nod to indicate that she was picturing it, although she couldn't say that she felt this magical energy that Birdie was talking about. She felt a bit of warmth in her stomach, sure, but she figured this was from her morning coffee. Nevertheless, Izzy forced herself to recognize the energy flowing through her, and she compelled it to shift upward from her chest into and down the lengths of her arms. With a distant voice, Birdie continued to instruct her. Contrary to popular belief, witches don't need to rely on spoken words for spellcasting. Instead, you need to learn how to control your energy in your own way. Feel the energy, focus on what you want to happen, and then make it happen. Force the energy to take shape in the form of a spell. Swallowing nervously, Izzy shut her eyes even tighter and focused with all her might on the lighter, and the warm feeling now slowly drifting into her clammy hands. Please, please, please let this work. Then Izzy felt something solid poke her clenched fist. She opened her eyes expectantly, but both her hands were as empty as when she'd first sat down. She heaved a disappointed sigh. Oh well, Birdie shrugged casually. I didn't honestly expect it to work on the first go. I did, Izzy grumbled, still thinking about the solid piece of something she'd felt for a brief moment. Isn't there an easier way? Like, aren't there written spells with instructions and whatnot? There are, her grandmother admitted, but the instructions aren't exactly straightforward. They tell you what the spell will be able to accomplish if performed correctly, but you won't find any magic words or chants that will make it easier. Typically, if you're struggling with a spell, then saying a quick prayer to the three or picking a ritual chant dedicated to the three is your best bet for success. You'll find some of those in the book, Beginner's Luck and How to Achieve It, but I can give you a couple of my own favorites as well if you'd like. Izzy gave her a confused frown. So, basically, it's all on me to figure this out. On my own. Basically, Sam confirmed. You're at a bit of a disadvantage since you started learning so late in life, but it'll get easier once you've gone through the ceremony. But I have to perform at least 3 spells at the ceremony. Sam nodded. Correct. Well, that's stupid. Just keep trying, dear, Birdie told Izzy with a supportive smile. You'll get the hang of it soon enough. And remember to always be grateful for your powers, Sam added in a stiff voice, like they were reading from a script. Birdie pointed at her grandchild with great emphasis and pride, clearly unaware of the underlying sarcasm of their statement. Yes, she agreed gravely. Always remember to be grateful. Furthermore, while we're on the topic, let's go over a few pieces of information that are crucial for a witchling like yourself to remember. Witchling? Izzy repeated with a smirk. A young witch who has not yet completed her studies, Sam explained. In the witching community, Birdie began importantly, ignoring the kid's short exchange, we are all under the authority of our individual covens and their heads. In Midnight, that would be Deacon Devon. Although we're mostly permitted to go about our days however we so wish, there are a few rules and guidelines which we are all expected to respect. Dark magic is strictly forbidden, as is using your powers for harmful purposes or to kill, and you should generally avoid performing spells in the presence of humans unless they're already aware of magic. Also, Sam cut in unexpectedly, although the ceremony will improve your ability to heal and extend your lifespan, this does not mean that you're invulnerable. You can still be injured and you can still die. Yes, that's an excellent point, Birdie said with an air of great importance. Izzy nodded gravely. So, what happens if you don't follow the rules? It depends on the situation, her grandmother replied slowly. But in extreme cases, such as when a witch is found guilty of murder or widespread exposure of magic, she may have her powers permanently stripped in a polar ceremony. A polar ceremony? Izzy repeated. It's basically the opposite of an induction ceremony, Sam briefly explained. While we're on the topic of your ceremony, Birdie continued, as you know, on the day of your ceremony, you will be asked to present 3 examples of your magical abilities. While you may choose any 3 spells or enchantments you are capable of performing, it's also important for you to be aware of the 7 disciplines of magic. The 7 disciplines. Izzy tried to commit the term to memory. They don't apply to the ceremony so much as they do to the rest of your life, Birdie explained in what was likely meant to be a reassuring voice, but to Izzy this sounded awfully permanent. So, I can only choose 1 discipline of magic to practice? She asked, more than a little disappointed. She's making it sound a lot more serious than it is, Sam assured her. The 7 disciplines are just there to categorize the different types of magic. Most witches choose 1 to focus on, to excel within their chosen discipline, but nothing says that you have to stick to only that type of magic. Oh, so what are the disciplines? First, there's the agriculturalists. Birdie, who had clearly just been waiting for her and Sam to wrap up, began to count them off on her fingers. They specialize in plants and wildlife, and they make sure that all of our crops and livestock continue to thrive. Really? Magical farmers? Izzy hadn't considered that in order to stay away from human society, they would have to be literally self-sustaining, but she figured it made sense. Second, there's creature care, Birdie went on. Much as the name implies, these witches specialize in healing magic and spend their lives researching each of our unique biologic makeups and new treatment techniques. Doctors, gotcha. Izzy shot her grandmother a pair of finger guns, which were apparently unwelcome, as Birdie ignored her completely. Sam attempted to stifle their laughter. Third, we have the divination discipline. I do have to warn you, though, it's very rare that a witch possesses the true sight, and because of this, divination is the least substantiated of the disciplines. Nevertheless, they're hard workers and honest believers, and we do have a couple of talented seers in our family tree. They busy themselves with predicting natural disasters, war, famine, and events which we would benefit from being made aware of beforehand. Next is the discipline of the sacred. This is a discipline for those who wish to devote their lives to the three goddesses. They study sacred texts and symbols, lead their communities, worship ceremonies, and dedicate everything to serving the three. They act as community leaders a lot of the time, including here at midnight. So they're like a theocratic government / priesthood? Izzy asked with a frown. Kind of, Sam replied. But I feel like it's worth mentioning that the entire Devon family have been dedicated students of the sacred for, ever. They basically run the town because of it. Birdie's face drew into a grimace which explained quite clearly what she thought about the Devons, but would never say out loud, and in spite of Izzy's burning desire to hear their grandmothers dish the dirt on this awful family, she decided that it was probably best to move on. Got it. Izzy hurried them on. And the fifth kind? The fifth is the discipline of historians, Birdie continued. They study our history, the evolution of witchcraft across the globe, and continue to commit our current history to paper for future historians to study. Most historians also teach at the local schools, and because of where their headquarters are located, they also run the library. They're quite adept at helping students with research papers, but you should also watch out for dust maggots before bringing home a book. They'll eat anything. The sixth is the anthropology discipline. These are witches who seek to study other cultures, both magical and mundane, which is why they are often referred to as travelers. Travelers visit foreign planets and even the edges of the universe to study and record their lives and habits. Some travelers, if they're really lucky and have access to a certain kind of transportation, might even visit even stranger places. This is also where the majority of our family have fallen, including myself and both of your parents. Izzy couldn't help but to snort. My mom was an anthropologist? She asked with an air of incredulity. Not for long, Birdie replied simply, but Izzy thought she sensed a tenseness as her grandmother swiftly moved on with the conversation. The seventh discipline is relatively new as it was introduced just a century or so ago, and it is that of the peacekeepers. They were tagged to replace the dark magic discipline when Witchkind unanimously decided to formally discontinue and disavow the practice of dark magic. As the name suggests, the peacekeepers study battle magic and work hard to keep the magic community safe and secret from the humans. What's the difference between dark magic and regular magic? Izzy asked after a moment's contemplation. Birdie looked at Sam and raised her eyebrows. Do you want to take this one? She asked. Sam stretched their neck, producing a disturbing series of cracks, and then took a breath. Izzy prepared herself for another long and convoluted explanation of how magic works. Have you seen Star Wars? They asked. Birdie and Izzy both stared at them in surprise. Yeah? Izzy replied hesitantly. It's like the dark side versus the light side of the Force. Oh, yeah, I get it. Birdie still looked lost, but appeared willing to accept this odd conclusion with grace, and she quickly went on with her lesson and began to show Izzy examples of the different disciplines of magic. Although it was cool to watch a little sprig of lavender bloom into a full plant, and then to have a romantic fortune read through a complicated ritual that involved burning a handful of dried herbs and unidentified little bones, it was significantly less cool when Birdie pulled out a long dagger and cut a deep slash on her forearm, even if it did instantly heal just a few seconds later thanks to Birdie's healing charm. Half expecting Sam and Birdie to get up and battle each other next, Izzy was a little disappointed when she was told that the rest of the demonstrations would have to wait until later. Birdie informed her that she would get the chance to witness the magic of the sacred discipline during her ceremony in a few days, and she was already preparing for a proper introduction to anthropological magic. But what about the historians? Izzy bugged her grandmother as they descended the stairs from the tower study, but Birdie just waved her hand dismissively. Nobody cares about the historians, she replied. Well, That's kind of true. Izzy replied reluctantly. But what about the peacekeeper magic? I would definitely enjoy learning how to properly kick someone's ass. Birdie gave in with a deep sigh. Fine, I'll see if Tom and Omar can help me with the demonstration on Thursday. But that's just 2 days before the ceremony, Izzy pointed out. What about tomorrow? We already have plans for tomorrow, Sam replied. Really? Izzy asked, her eyes suddenly glowing with anticipation. Oh yes, Birdie nodded with a secretive grin. Tomorrow, we're going traveling. And that's the end of chapter 4!
Heck yeah, it is!
Heck yeah! This was a fun one. We got to see some magic. We got to learn about the 7 disciplines. I really liked that. Some of them are boring.
Yeah, actually, which one would you choose if you had to choose one?
I think it would probably come down to either the anthropologists or the peacekeepers.
Yeah. Anthropologists and the peacekeepers are probably the coolest. Yeah. Are you excited for them to go traveling?
I am excited for them to go traveling. Where are they going to?
I guess we'll find out in the next chapter.
Sweet.
Which is called... The Trunk. I think you'll like this one.
Heck yeah, I'm excited about it. The next one's the Thursday, and then after that we have the ceremony. The one we've been waiting for.
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
This is interesting. Something's gonna happen at the ceremony. Anyway. Yeah, I'm really excited. Thanks for tuning in with us. It's been a great time as always, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks. Oh! Don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, now we're done. See you later.
See ya.